Raga, siamo in live un attimino. Ok ragazzi, ci dovremmo essere. Ci dovremmo essere. Ok. Aspetta che controllo. Si vede un bello schermo nero. Ok raga, un attimino che non si vede niente. Normale, ho sbagliato una cosa. Non è l'evento, ma è il lancio dello shuttle. Oggi si lancia uno shuttle e quindi il lancio dello shuttle. Raga, non si vede niente. Lo so, però devo cambiare una cosa. Raga, lo so che non c'è la live streaming. Sono su OBS, è la prima volta che la uso, quindi lasciatemi un attimino. Raga. Gli ultimi spunti. Tori 2. Ragazzi, un attimo che sto cercando di mettere. Sono su OBS, ma non me la fa vedere. Anche se. Boh. Raga, non mi fa fare una cosa, quindi un attimino che si vede che boh. Non me lo fa fare, quindi datemi un minuto. Raga, mi dà risoluzione non supportata e non ne capisco il motivo. Sì, questo cioè, in realtà mi dovreste vedere, ma è una cosa che non succede, quindi non ne capisco il motivo, sinceramente. Raga, cattura lo schermo. Sto continuando a guardare dispositivo di cattura, cattura la finestra, cattura in uscita. Raga, spero che vediate adesso perché boh. Raga, mi dovreste anche sentire, però non so come mai non mi fa, non so, non mi fa vedere, non mi fa, dice che non è supportato modalità schermo, quindi automaticamente mi fa vedere lo schermo. Cerco di sistemarlo il prima possibile, un attimo che controllo, ma boh. Ok, no raga, lo vedete benissimo tutto, non c'è mica niente di provato, va bene. Ok, andiamo, allora andiamo qua, però voi vedete ancora quello di prima. Bella roba, bella roba, bella roba. Ah no, aspettate. No, vedete giusto, vedete giusto. Ok. Qua, sì. Circa. Diretta. Ci dovrebbe essere qualcosa in diretta, non mi ricordo assolutamente niente. Lancio. Dragon. Dragon si chiama, hanno chiamato così. Raga, cioè, diretta in teoria questo dovrebbe essere giusto. Speriamo bene. Speriamo bene, speriamo bene.
Ciao Pina, buonasera. Buonasera anche a te Patrizia.
Quella
Grazie a te
sbagliata.
Massimiliano, grazie a te che ci sei a vederla la diretta, grazie.
Sta guardando, quindi vado a chiedere un attimino.
Vediamo intanto in basso sulla destra, lo terrò ancora per qualche minuto. In basso vediamo nella live la simulazione della missione, quindi più o meno quelle che sono le fasi della missione. Gli astronauti salgono, sono già saliti sulla navicella, l'altro giorno abbiamo visto proprio mentre salivano con l'ascensore, adesso sono entrati, hanno chiuso i portelloni e inizieranno le procedure prevolo, quindi ci sarà il distacco della Dragon dal braccio che conduce, no, al portellone per entrare, quindi ci sarà il distacco, poi ci sarà il lancio, dopodiché ci sarà il distacco tra il razzo, il Falcon, e la navicella che è quella davanti, che sta davanti proprio sopra al razzo, che è la Dragon V2. Quindi adesso nella simulazione vediamo proprio questo, ecco il distacco del primo stadio, ecco qui, la propulsione per dare una spinta ulteriore e il distacco del secondo stadio. Dopodiché la nave spaziale, la navicella, sarà libera di andare verso la stazione spaziale internazionale, dove sono ad attenderli gli astronauti della stazione.
Ci dovrei quasi
compagnia. Non vedo l'ora di avere compagnia. Immaginate cosa vuol dire.
Un nome stranissimo, comunque Space Official c'è, quindi andiamo su Space Official, la live. Tilt adesso spero che mi chiami, se l'ho visto. Ok. 69.000 spettatori.
Safely escape from the time of launch all the way to orbit.
And as we look to the future beyond this test flight later this year, the first operational crewed mission for NASA will take place. NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins
have done it. Try to review your launch commit criteria and indicate readiness at the appropriate time. Step
that go, no go for propellant loading, which happens at about 45 minutes before launch. But back to our Crew 1 mission, NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, and Shannon Walker, and Suichi Noguchi of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, were chosen to support this mission.
But today, Doug Hurley is the spacecraft commander for this mission. He previously flew on 2 space shuttle missions as the pilot on STS-127 and STS-135, which was the final space shuttle flight. Here's a closer look at Doug Hurley.
Excited?
Very excited. Yeah, very excited.
You feel ready? Feel pumped?
Oh yeah, I think we're ready. I think we're certainly ready.
Joining the SpaceX Demo 2 test. He is a Marine Corps colonel and test pilot. He was selected as an astronaut in 2000. He piloted Space Shuttle Endeavour and Atlantis for STS-135, the final space shuttle mission. Introducing NASA astronaut Doug Hurley.
It's a life-changing process in
At
so
Doug
many
Hurley.
ways to fly into space. It's just overwhelming in some respects.
You're ready? Feel pumped?
Oh yeah, I think we're ready. Just the sensations, the rumbling,
Joining the SpaceX Demo 2 test.
acceleration.
He is a Marine Corps colonel and test pilot. He was selected as an astronaut in 2000. He piloted Space Shuttle Endeavour and Atlantis for STS-135, the final space shuttle mission. Introducing NASA astronaut Doug Hurley.
This will be the first time the Dragon had crew on board, and so there was it's a life-changing process in so many ways to fly into space. It's just overwhelming in some respects. Definitely work. To be able to just I think we're ready. Just the sensations, the rumbling,
Joining the SpaceX Demo 2 test. He is a Marine Corps colonel and test pilot. He was selected as an astronaut in 2000. He piloted Space Shuttle Endeavour and Atlantis for STS-135, the final space shuttle mission. Introducing NASA astronaut Doug Hurley.
the Dragon had crew on board, and so there was it's a life-changing process in so many ways to fly into space. It's just overwhelming.
Fly a new vehicle. So it makes me so
Ragazzi, ok, colpa mia, i 2 spettatori che ci sono adesso sono santi. Adesso devo cambiare semplicemente una cosa e ci sono. Devo cambiare il microfono. Allora, che figata, posso farvi vedere anche un po' male. Andiamo a metterli per bene. Raga, ho ancora il microfono sballato. Tour audio. Aspetta. Togliamo questo. Facciamo. Rimuovi. Non mi sentirete più tra pochissimo. Ok? No. Microfono auxiliare. Audio del desktop. Ok? L'audio del desktop però adesso non si sente più, quindi devo fare anche l'audio in uscita per farvelo sentire effettivamente. E poi in teoria ci siamo.
we've got a lot of objectives on board the vehicle that we need to accomplish to really make sure that it's good to go. We'll make sure all those systems are working during the test flight so that the future missions will have them available even if they don't plan to utilize them. Through years of the NASA team helping to share that experience and teaching them the lessons that we've learned by going through this, now there's a
desktop, postazione. No. Raga, controllo live, ma in teoria ci dovremmo essere. Andiamo a togliere qua l'audio, così sentiamo solamente tutti e due un audio solo, ma non c'è l'evento Dio. Non so adesso cosa stiamo facendo, le persone. Sì. Raga, non è l'evento, ma è il numero di un guardato speciale. Appena ci siamo, ve lo dico. 16 minuti per fare questa cosa. Raga, spero che non si senta tutto doppio, adesso sto sentendo, quindi mi sentirete doppia. Mi si sente doppia. Raga, non ne capisco il motivo, magari devo togliere sto coso. Andiamo a rimuoverlo. Ok. Fatto danni, comunque ci dovremmo essere. Ok ragazzi, siamo, vi lascio un attimo qua, mentre io devo un attimo fare una cosa, quindi devo avviare e mettervelo così. Devo un attimo andare, quindi vi lascio così. Prima di 57 minuti ci ritroviamo sicuramente tra 2 circa. Sì, ci vediamo tra meno di 57 minuti, un attimo. che dicono. Ah. What? Credo che magari si sente. Ok? Ragazzi, un attimo.
Control Hawthorne pole, and then the launch director's pole for propellant loading. When we get to about T-minus 40 minutes, the crew access arm will retract, and Bob and Doug will get the call to close their visors and arm the launch escape system. This is the automated system in place that can fire the 8 Super Draco thrusters on Dragon to quickly separate the crew from the rocket, either on the pad or during the flight on the ride uphill.
And once we reach T-minus 35 minutes, propellant loading for the Falcon 9 will begin.
And then the
we got there on
pole for
Wednesday.
propellant
We got all the
loading.
way down to about 17
When we get to about
minutes before
T-minus
launch
40
before
minutes,
we
the
had to
crew
cancel
access
because
arm
of
will
weather.
retract, and Bob and
But
Doug
we're
will get the
we're
call to close
optimistic
their
right now.
visors and arm
Conditions
the
have
launch
been
escape
improving,
system.
and so
This
we're
is
looking
the
to
automated
press ahead
system in
once
place
again
that can
into
fire
loading
the 8
fuel onto
Super
that
Draco
Falcon 9
thrusters
rocket.
on Dragon
Throughout
to
the
quickly
countdown,
separate
we've
the
been
crew
getting
from the
some
rocket, either
incredible
on the pad
views
or
of the
during the
astronauts
flight
inside Dragon,
ride
just
uphill.
making all of their final preparations. Once we reach T-minus views of their suits on the displays as they just get distracted and ready for launch. Got there on Wednesday. Often described all the way down as an extension of that Dragon spacecraft, where we can always think of it as another spacecraft inside of spacecraft. We're optimistic right now. Support everything. Conditions have been improving.
Yeah, countdown one, technical pole
complete.
complete. Training speed onto that rocket.
Throughout the countdown, we've been getting some incredible views of the astronauts inside Dragon, just making all of their final preparations. Reached close-up views of their 5 minutes on the displays. They just all get distracted and ready for launch. Got there on team. The astronauts inside Dragon, just making all of their final preparations. Reached close-up views of their 5 minutes on the displays. They just all get distracted and ready for launch. Got there on team. The astronauts inside Dragon, just making all of their final preparations. Well, we did get the call out that and propellant starting to pick up. Things are really starting to feel real. We did get to jump down real quick with Team Kennedy. See if you guys are just as excited. I can't sit still right now. It's starting to feel real.
Yeah, it's hard to sit still in here, right, Leland?
Rocket fuel going through my veins still.
I know. It's so awesome when we see them sitting there in their suits. We're less than an hour away now. So far, things look like we might make it. We might make it. So I want to ask you what it was like the first time you put on a spacesuit when you knew you were going to space.
Oh, that was February of 2008. We were in the ONC building getting the pumpkin suits on. A little bit different than the SpaceX fly SpaceX suits, but it was kind of surreal, you know. And to think that all of these, it took 10 years of training to fly in space. It took me 10 years from when I got in the Corps in 1998 to flying in February of 2008. So it was a long road to get there, but it was so worth it and so sweet. And, you know, learning how to use the green apple, the connections for oxygen, for cooling, much different than these suits that we have here with SpaceX. And so it's a lot more complicated to go through that whole series of things that you have to do to make sure you're safe in the suit. But we've evolved, we're ready, and they look so cool and calm and collected in their suits and in the vehicle. They're focusing and getting ready to fly in space.
And there's so much excitement around the center. I know, Leland, you've been getting some messages. You got another message from another astronaut.
Yeah, Sunny Williams. Okay, so Sunny,
she's kind of the best.
She's
Sunny is awesome.
She's a commercial crew also.
She was one of the original cadre. She was one of the original 4 who trained with Bob and Doug from the beginning of the commercial crew program.
And she's one of my classmates. Look at her there. What is she wearing?
There she is. Hey,
the
Sunny.
meatball. No, she had the worm one on Wednesday, so she wore the meatball today. So
She's the best.
But now she can wear the worm ball. I guess.
Yes. The worm ball. Yeah, she can mix it up. But yeah, Sunny's awesome. She's training to fly on the Boeing Starliner in the not too distant future. So really glad she's watching and showing some love. So thanks a lot, Sunny, for sending that note. And again, we're looking at a live view of the Crew Dragon on top of a Falcon 9 rocket. You can see the crew access arm to the right of your screen. That's the hallway that Bob and Doug walked down to get into the White Room, which was the last place we saw them standing up before they climbed inside Dragon. And again, the wider shot there of Launch Complex 39A, where we are inside of an hour from liftoff, and I think we're just a couple minutes away from the pull we're going to hear before they start propellant load. Again, a 2-stage rocket there, and gosh, you guys, the weather looks not that bad. I mean, obviously that is not an official forecast, but it doesn't look quite as bad as it did Wednesday. We've got a little bit better odds. So there's the countdown clock. We're going to pause to listen to that comm. If you're just joining us, we're less than 50 minutes from the scheduled liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket carrying Crew Dragon. And if we start to hear any kind of update on weather or polling, we will pause to listen in for that. But if things go as scheduled, we should be hearing the launch director verify go for propellant load at about T-minus 45 minutes. So we're going to send it over to Hawthorne to carry the ball. John Insprucker or Jesse, are you there?
This weather is go at this time.
Dragon copy, go weather.
Primi movimenti che fanno.
And there you heard that call out. So far we have good weather. We are go for launch today. This is getting really exciting. I don't know about you, Dan, but my heart is beating pretty fast right now.
Yeah, we've been waiting for those words since Wednesday.
Oh,
and
yeah.
we did hear a call to the crew, just in case you missed it, that they were only tracking one final weather constraint. It was the cumulus cloud rule. They were expecting it to clear up within 10 minutes, and it's cleared up now. So we are currently go on weather.
Yes, and it's been pretty incredible to be so close to launch, and the road leading up to this point has been pretty incredible as well.
It has been. It's been a partnership between NASA and SpaceX. We've been working together since SpaceX started flying cargo to the International Space Station, now getting ready to launch crew. And we've been really fortunate to work with not only a lot of international partners on the International Space Station, but a lot of
really
great
And as a reminder,
companies.
here in the control room, we'll be closing doors here once we start with propellant load. Any last-minute bio breaks, please go ahead and accomplish those in the next few minutes.
And the launch director just getting the teams ready. We'll be coming up on that propellant loading again. That starts at about 35 minutes prior to liftoff, so in about 20. Go, no go coming up really soon. So let's go over to our man, John I, for the latest. John?
It's T-minus 47 minutes, 24 seconds. We're continuing to count down. As you just heard, the launch director and launch team are preparing for the readiness for launch poll. Now, the launch director is currently checking with Dragon mission director and NASA launch manager for their readiness. And actually, it sounds like everybody is good there. The launch director will then ask the team, he'll tell them the poll is open, and the 13 members of the SpaceX launch team will be electrically polled for their go to load propellant, as well as continue all the way to launch. Now, we will hear that poll results and a briefing from the launch director at about T-minus 45 minutes. The good news right now is that the weather is go. All the conditions that were red shortly a while ago at T-minus 1 hour have cleared. We're as the weather forecaster said, cautiously optimistic.
Countdown.
The
Hole
probability
is complete. We're go for propellant load.
Di risolvere il problema.
Well, we got an early call out there.
And launch
from-
control clear to retract the access arm on time. Cover that. Arming access arm retract at T-minus 45 minutes.
Got an early call from SpaceX launch director Mike Taylor that the poll is go. He also heard the direction T-minus 45 minutes to prepare for retract of the crew arm.
Raga, spero che si possa
As we hear more discussion, we'll stop and let you listen in. But right now, weather for liftoff, ground level winds are good, 10 to 15 miles an hour, well within limits. Upper altitude balloons show that conditions are acceptable. The red weather conditions have cleared up, the last one being cumulus clouds. And the probability of violation is set at 30% right now, so that's 70% chance of good weather. We're continuing to watch. There is about a less than 10% chance of lightning. We're also watching the abort corridor off of the Atlantic coast. In case, for example, at stage separation, Dragon had to abort into the ocean. The conditions there are acceptable. There has not been lightning lately. The weather, winds are good. Light rain, it is go, but NASA is going to continue to watch those conditions.
T-minus 45 minutes and counting. Reminder on hold and launch escape protocol. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD, and they will approve aborting launch out of sequence and proceed to launch abort. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold on the countdown net. Launch control will immediately abort the launch auto sequence and proceed to the launch abort auto sequence. Operators shall also advise launch director whether structural breaker fire is imminent or occurring for Dragon manual escape flight rules. A reminder on fire alarm instructions. In the event of a fire alarm, key operators previously briefed will remain at their post while the alarm is evaluated. In the event that personal safety is threatened, evacuate to the south-facing emergency exit, which leads directly outside. At this time, weather is go for launch.
You can see on the screen, we're inside T-minus 40, we're T-minus 44 minutes, 5 seconds. Crew access arm retracting away. SpaceX launch director has given the final brief to the crew. And we will be beginning propellant loading at T-minus 35 minutes. So right now on Falcon 9, we're ready to get into propellant loading. Dragon, crew, getting configured, set up. The arm is pulling away. The range is go for launch. They continue to monitor the air and the sea space. Everything looks good. And we finally have gotten green across the board on the weather conditions, but we can't take a deep breath quite yet. We're going to have to watch the weather all the way down to T0, both here at Kennedy Space Center and out in the Atlantic in the abort zones. Now earlier we saw many of you following the launch from the United States on our hotspot map. Now that we're inside an hour, we're seeing large numbers of folks logging on, tuning in from coast to coast and around the world. So we'd like to know, is this your first time watching a launch live, not counting Wednesday? And if not, how many have you seen before? Tell us using the hashtag LaunchAmerica from your favorite social media platform. And with that, at T-minus 42 minutes, 50 seconds, conditions are go, and we are counting down for an on-time launch. Let's send it back over to Kennedy Space Center as the action begins to pick up on the pad.
Dragon, SpaceX, you are go for Section 7, close visors and arm launch escape system.
We will put Section 7 in work, visors coming close.
All right, the countdown clock is continuing to tick. My heart is continuing to beat 5 million beats a second, and we are getting so close.
SpaceX Dragon in 7.2, visors are closed. We're arming launch escape system.
Copy.
And as you just heard, the crew is arming the launch escape system. That is one of the absolute last big milestones prior to liftoff, other than nominal Falcon operations. So just a minute ago, we saw the crew access arm retract, and obviously we just heard on the comms, Bob and Doug
getting ready to arm the launch escape system. And so that is something that protects them all the way to orbit. So when fueling starts at about T-minus 35 minutes, so just over 6 minutes from now, they will have the capability to abort, to separate from Falcon 9 either on the pad or even after liftoff. That's a critical safety capability. And we are going to go over to Hawthorne now to take us through these next minutes. Jesse?
Section, switching to nitrogen.
We did hear that call out that they are arming the launch escape system, so very exciting. SpaceX has designed Crew Dragon and Falcon 9 to be the safest launch system ever flown. So we brought back Nick Picone, SpaceX's Nick Picone, to talk more about this again. Thanks for coming back and joining us today, Nick.
Hey, Jesse. Happy to be here. Still monitoring the launch here with our recovery and ground operations teams.
Awesome. And Nick was our mission manager for our in-flight abort test earlier this year and now works on the Starlink team. Nick, on Wednesday, you talked about the launch escape system. Could you just give us a brief summary today for those that are joining today?
Sure. So the launch escape system, again, is our ultimate safety feature to keep Bob and Doug safe in the event of a major Falcon anomaly on the pad. The system is designed to automatically fire if either vehicle detects a dangerous condition developing. And if that happens, Dragon will use its 8 Super Draco engines to push the capsule off and away to a safe distance away from this Falcon. This capability is absolutely critical. It's what keeps the crew safe, and we're now active and armed on the pad with it protecting the crew.
And as you mentioned, the launch escape system allows the Dragon to separate and get away from the vehicle. I believe it goes into the ocean. What happens after it lands safely in the ocean?
Correct. So for most of our failure modes, the successful end state is Dragon deploying parachutes, splashing down safely in the ocean. But since a launch escape can happen while the vehicle's on the pad or anywhere in flight up through orbit, it could be splashing down right off the coast of Cape Canaveral. It could be splashing down thousands of miles away in the North Atlantic. If that happens, to make sure we can get to Bob and Doug as quickly as possible, the Space Force's 45th Space Wing, Task Force 45, has pararescue teams staged and ready all around the world, ready to drop in and rescue Bob and Doug as soon as possible.
And you mentioned that the launch escape system will keep them safe all the way up to orbit. What other options are there after Dragon is in orbit?
Sure. So if for any reason we're unable to dock to the International Space Station, we have several pre-planned return trajectories, which will bring the capsule down to a splashdown point close to shore, where NASA and SpaceX recovery forces will be waiting to recover them. It'll look like an otherwise totally normal recovery operation, except for the early end of mission. This operation is something we're doing with one of 2 identical crew recovery ships. We do that because the landing sites, we want to maintain as much flexibility as possible. There could be changing weather conditions that bring down one site, leave the other one up. So we have those 2 identical ships, one in the Atlantic, one in the Gulf of Mexico. And our space operations team can redirect the spacecraft to go to whichever site is the safest option for the crew at that time.
And with the vehicle, in almost any scenario, it sounds like the vehicle will land into the ocean. And it may look like a gentle landing into the ocean, but it's a pretty dynamic event happening. And you mentioned there are teams that are ready to go and rescue the vehicle and the astronauts on board. How do you prepare for something like that, especially with so many different scenarios that could happen?
Sure. So we're lucky to have had about a decade of recovery experience with Cargo Dragon 1 in our previous trips to the International Space Station. That, along with our booster recovery missions, we've got a great team of recovery operators here who have a lot of offshore experience with our spacecraft. The system, though, we took that experience, we built up a new crew recovery ship, 2 identical crew recovery ships, I should say, which have a lot of those lessons learned baked into the design of that ship and the operations. These new ships have complete medical facilities, an operational helipad, and redundant communications, power, and propulsion to make sure they're robust and ready for anything we encounter offshore. We've also done tons of training exercises with SpaceX team, the NASA team, and the rescue forces I mentioned earlier, practicing capsule recovery, emergency scenarios where we have to get the crew out of the capsule while they're still in the water, as well as those helicopter evacuations, taking off and landing from the pad many times so that we make sure the team is ready to do that. They're all staged and ready. They feel ready to support, and will be ready to call on us if anything goes wrong today.
Awesome. It sounds like Bob and Doug are in some really good hands and will be safe no matter what occurs on the vehicle. So thank you, Nick, for joining us again, for walking us through all of those details. I hope you're just as excited as we are for launch coming up here very, very shortly now. So we're going to send it over to KSC to Lauren.
Thank you, Jesse. So as you just heard, fueling is about to begin at T-minus 35 minutes. We are about 50 seconds away from that. And so we're getting really, really close to the first launch of astronauts into orbit from American soil since 2011. The launch escape system is armed, which, as you know, happens before fueling, and Dragon propellant load, that's the propellants that are inside of the Dragon capsule, not the rocket. Prop load for Dragon took place weeks ago, and just a few miles down the road in what we call Dragon Land. And those propellants, they are MMH, or monomethyl hydrazine, which is the fuel that we use. It's hypergolic fuel. And NTO, or nitrogen tetroxide, that's the oxidizer. Those two come together and they ignite in space to propel the vehicle. You don't need that TTEB or a third thing to ignite, because hypergolic propellants don't require it. You just need the fuel and the oxidizer. And as you just heard, propellant load has started on Falcon 9, and that's awesome. All right, so that bipropellant system feeds all of the engines on Dragon. So Dragon has 12 service section engines in each. So there's 3 in each quad, 3, 3, 3, and 3. Those are used for on-orbit maneuvering for Dragon. There's also 4 additional Dracos that are underneath the nose cone for large Delta V maneuvers that the vehicle will perform. But the engines that Nick Picone was talking about earlier are Super Draco engines. We have 2 in each quad of the vehicle, so 8 total. And those are bigger engines with a high flow propellant system, and those are what lift Dragon off of Falcon 9 in the unlikely event of emergency that requires us to get off of Falcon. Now, you probably remember, let's see, Mercury, Apollo, Soyuz, they have that big pointy tower on top. That's the launch escape system for those vehicles. It's actually just another rocket on top of the spaceship that lifts the vehicle off. In the case of Dragon, our escape system is integrated into the vehicle completely. And so that's just better from one less thing you have to jettison every single flight. But it also allows us to have escape capability from the pad before T0 all the way through to orbit. And so even at the very last minute, if we needed to get off of stage 2 while we're in space, we could actually escape to orbit. So yeah, that's the escape system for little baby Dragon here.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks for walking us through that, because I think it's really important that people understand that critical safety capability, and that's the whole point when we hear that launch escape system is armed. What that means is that in an instant, they can separate from Falcon 9, shoot up into the air, and they can splash down safely in the Atlantic Ocean under Dragon's parachutes. And it was designed to do that. So now that fueling is underway, it's been going on for about 2 minutes now. So they have that safety capability ready to go on standby in an instant if they need it. And so we want to go over to Hawthorne now for an operational update from John Insprucker. John?
Stage 6 fuel and stage 2 fuel, all flow rates tracking nominally.
Of the vehicle, so 8 total, and those are bigger engines with a high flow propellant system, and those are what lift Dragon off of Falcon 9 in the unlikely event of emergency that requires us to get off of Falcon. Now, probably remember, let's see, Mercury, Apollo, Soyuz, they have that big pointy tower on top. That's the launch escape system for those vehicles. It's
okay, ragazzi.
We're T-minus 32 minutes, counting down. These final minutes, everything's still looking good for Falcon 9 and Dragon for an on-time launch. Falcon 9 did begin propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes at planned. Now on the Falcon 9, we use a fuel and oxidizer as the propellants that power it. The fuel is commonly known as RP1. That's rocket propellant grade 1 kerosene. The oxidizer is densified liquid oxygen, also called LOX. Densified means it is kept much colder than typical for launch vehicles. This allows for more oxidizer to be loaded into the first and second stages. Now with the fuel and oxidizer on hand, we need an ignition source to complete that fire triangle, as we call it. For this, Falcon 9 uses a fluid called T-Teb. It ignites in the presence of oxygen and gives off a green-colored flame. Now it's hard to see on the first stage ignition due to the water that will be spraying on the pad, but you might just see the green flare as the second stage engine ignites following stage separation over 2.5 minutes into flight. Now currently first stage fuel tank is about 10% full. The first stage, as a reminder, as you look on the left side of your screens, the first stage is the long white cylinder at the bottom, topped off by the black cylinder. So over 2/3 of the rocket is that first stage. So the fuel tank is getting loaded. We're also loading the liquid oxygen into the first stage also. The second stage, which is the top 1/3 between the Dragon and the black cylinder, that's the white second stage, that is being loaded with fuel right now. That's about 8% loaded at this moment. Liquid oxygen loading is going to begin on second stage at T-minus 16 minutes 30 seconds. Liquid oxygen loading will continue on both stages all the way down to the last few minutes of the count. We're also loading helium into pressure vessels on the stages. That's used to pressurize tanks in flight as the propellant is pulled out by the strong Merlin turbopumps. On board the Dragon spacecraft, astronauts are monitoring systems while the propellant is loaded into Falcon 9. While we mentioned we had trained them with sounds that we had recorded on board. They've been through most of the propellant load, and they are now experiencing those sounds and vibrations.
Stage 1,
the
cryo helium load
continues
started.
to report no problems. They are go to support launch. Weather, the last of the red conditions cleared up about 15 minutes ago. Everything is marginal but acceptable on the weather. We'll continue to watch all the way through the countdown. Now, as a reminder, today we are now into an instantaneous launch window now that we've begun propellant loading. So at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we'll have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity tomorrow, May 31st.
Thanks, John. For Demo 2, Bob and Doug's flight to station will take about 19 hours, and their journey is fairly similar to the trip our Cargo Dragon makes back and forth to the International Space Station, but with two noticeable differences, and that's docking and splashdown.
As we await T-minus 0 in just under 29 minutes from now, the ground operations teams are doing a series of system checks to make sure Dragon and Falcon 9 are both ready for liftoff. And we're continuing to get live views inside the capsule with Bob and Doug, and you're now also looking in firing room 4 down there at the Cape.
Once we hit T0 and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon make their ascent until the Falcon 9 first and second stage separates and sends Dragon on its way to the space station.
And at this point, mission operators will prepare Dragon for on-orbit operations, where the vehicle will execute a series of burns that gradually raise its orbit to align more closely with the space station, as you can see in this animation. And just after putting Dragon into the same orbital plane as the station, the teams will get ready for Dragon's approach and docking maneuvers.
The next Dragon will make its approach and actually dock with the space station. And this is a very different process from what we've seen with Dragon cargo deliveries in the past, which use a process called berthing. Berthing requires a spacecraft to approach the station and then stop so a crew member can maneuver the station's robotic arm to capture the spacecraft. Docking on this version of Dragon can be done autonomously with no crew on board the station. It's typically a faster process, both when arriving and leaving, but it does still require pinpoint accuracy to approach safely.
Once captured, a spacecraft then gets attached to a common berthing mechanism, same type of port that we use to connect each of the modules on the station together. It's a little bit slower of a process, but the hatches are significantly larger than the docking ports, which makes them perfect for bringing up those really big cargo items.
Dragon will spend up to 120 days docked before preparing to return home. Following successful completion of Dragon's test objectives and cargo loading operations, the crew will close the cabin, perform final system checks, and configure the vehicle for undocking. Once the automated undocking sequence is complete, Dragon will complete 2 departure burns using its Draco engines, pushing it away from the space station.
And next up on the trip, deorbit entry and landing. We're splashdown, which is going to cover all the operations following that final departure maneuver. It's going to include events like the trunk separation, closing of the nose cone, a deorbit burn, and then eventually as they get into the atmosphere, the deployment of the drogue and the main parachutes, and all of that ends with splashdown right off the Florida coast. At that point, teams from SpaceX will move in with their recovery ship, grab the capsule out of the water, and work to get Bob and Doug out of Dragon after a successful mission in space. So we are 26 minutes away from launch. Fueling of Falcon 9 is continuing. Let's check in one more time down with the team at Kennedy. Murray?
All right, thanks, Dan. We are so pumped right now because things have cleared up and it looks like we might actually do this today. If you're just joining us, we are now 25 minutes, 46 seconds and counting from the first launch of astronauts to the International Space Station from U.S. soil in 9 years. This will mark the beginning of a new era where more people will be able to fly to space than ever before. And we want to share with you the results of a poll we asked a little earlier. If you could go to the moon, now it's not where the astronauts are going today, they're going to the space station, but if you could go to the moon, would you rather visit the South Pole where no one has been before or the Apollo 11 landing site? And it was a pretty even split. We had 46% of you say you would go to the moon's south pole, and 54% of you would go to the Apollo 11 landing site. I kind of side with the Apollo 11 landing site because I'm a history buff and I want to see where Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin set foot. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Lauren, which place would you go?
I'm with you on that one. And I would love to go see that flag there and those footsteps, those footprints there. Still be there, right? There's no wind up there.
Should still be there. Leland, how about you?
I think I'm with both of you because it's just like, the meatball, the classic. Yeah. Going to the classic spot. And that's where all of it started. That's where all that inspiration came, even though I was an antenna engineer not seeing it. But besides that, that's history.
And hopefully maybe it wouldn't have to be one or the other.
That's true.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we're going to learn more from going where we've never been before.
Exactly.
And so we need to go to the South Pole too. And we are thrilled to see all of you following along online. Thank you for answering our poll. And we're going to go over to Tahira, who's been monitoring all the action with less than 25 minutes to go. Tahira, I'm sure things are heating up online.
Hey Marie, I mean, you're completely right. Now that we have that go for launch, people are on the edge of their seat right now waiting on this historic moment to take flight. As you can see, photos are still coming in of just everyone around the country showing their excitement for this launch. And it's really been a touching thing to see how everyone's kept this excitement going from Wednesday's first attempt. So we just took a look at numbers, and we are now over 3 million people tuning in for this historic launch. And so for me personally, I just want to wish Bob and Doug the best of luck. This will be my own first time watching humans lift off to space from the United States, and it's just going to be a super emotional moment. For that, Marie, back to you at Kennedy for these last minutes before launch.
All right, thanks, Tahira. And Leland, we got 23 minutes and some change to go. What do you think Bob and Doug are feeling right now?
I think, they're very calm, cool, and collected as test pilots, but I think they're thinking about what are the steps that I have to take if a malfunction or something happens. So the nominal stuff is all kind of automated, but if something happens where they have to intervene with those touch screens, that's what they're thinking.
Mm-hmm. And we're just inside 23 minutes now. So on Wednesday, we were 5 minutes further in the countdown when we heard that call to scrub, and the weather was still very touch and go at this point on Wednesday. But today, it at least for right now, I don't want to jinx it. I'm afraid to even say it out loud, but it looks better today.
Yeah, and it feels like I'm feeling it a lot more than I did on Wednesday.
Right.
And, you know, speaking of Bob and Doug and them being really calm and cool and collected, I haven't had the opportunity to be in meetings with them and to watch them train. I have to say, and to all of my friends who work with them every single day, the feedback is always just what great people they are, and just how not just bright and sharp they are, but just good people. And around the office, we often refer to them as the dads.
The dads?
They're the dads. They're dads. They are dads, and we've met their families. And when you see people on that very personal level, it starts to mean so much. They are a part of our team. You know, they're not a customer. They're our team. They're not a payload. They're our team. They're a family. And so we're just so excited to see the dads up there today.
Yeah. Go dads! Yeah. All right, we're going to go send it over to Gary for an update from Houston. Gary?
Hey Marie, the space station team here is focused. All eyes are on the system checks that are happening across the board, and we're listening in as we close in on launch, and I can tell you that things are looking very good. Chris Cassidy will be watching from the International Space Station, right now flying over the Pacific Ocean. It's heading to cross right over the launch pad. We might even get some good views from the station. Hope to be capturing those. We'll have the launch view on the big screen up front, and everyone's excited to see our 2 crew members on their way to the International Space Station. But before we get to it, I just want to pass on good luck from the entire flight operations community here in Houston. It's always exciting to be doing something wholly new and history-making with station operations, and we can't wait to see our team members Bob and Doug in low Earth orbit and heading to the International Space Station. That's it from us here in Mission Control Houston. I'll send it back over to the team in Hawthorne for the latest happening there. John.
T-minus 20 minutes, 30 seconds. We're continuing to count down. Everything is still looking good for launch of Falcon 9 and Dragon. 22 minutes, 45 seconds after the hour.
Stage
right
2
now on the
RP1
right-hand
mode is
side,
complete.
you can see a large white cloud coming off of the strongback. That is normal. As we get ready to load the second stage with liquid oxygen, we have to chill in the plumbing lines going up that strongback. And so as we relieve pressure, the moist, humid Florida air condenses around it, and that gives you the cloud. So that tells us that things are actually on schedule. We did begin propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes. Fuel loading on the second stage, I believe we just heard the call out that it is complete. First stage fuel load is continuing, and right now that's a little more than, it's about 60% of the way full. So things are looking good. Second stage is getting ready to begin the liquid oxygen loading. After they finish chilling in the lines that you see on the monitor, they'll begin the load at T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds. The range right now is go, ready to support. Weather continues to be go. As we inch our way closer, we're keeping our fingers crossed. We're waiting to see if anybody calls out an issue, but for the moment, as you can see on the screen, it looks good. Now, on the Dragon side, the Dragon mission director and the team there are reporting no issues. They've done their communications checkouts. The crew access arm, as you can see, is retracted away from the spacecraft. The crew is strapped in, and they are ready to go. Now, final instructions will be going to the crew Falcon 9 and Dragon. 22 minutes, 45 seconds after the hour.
Stage
right
2
now on the
RP1
right-hand
mode is
side,
complete.
you can see a large white cloud coming off of the strongback. That is normal as we get ready.
Excitement going.
Dads. From the International Space Station.
Ready to load the second stage with liquid oxygen. We have to chill in the plumbing lines going up that strongback on the countdown net as we get close to zero and to liftoff. But right now at T-minus 18 minutes, 15 seconds, everything continues to be go for an on-time launch. So Dan, Jesse, things are looking pretty good. How are they doing over at your stand?
Things are great from about 15 feet away from you, John I, and honestly, things are looking pretty great down at the pad there. We're seeing a lot more blue in the sky. Green is the color we want when we're talking about weather, and that's where we're sitting right now. So we're continuing to count down. We are under 18 minutes away from liftoff. Again, it's an instantaneous liftoff it's going to be 12:22 and 45 seconds here on the West Coast, 3:22 and 45 seconds over on the East Coast there in Florida. Just a reminder, it's going to be about a 9-minute ride up to orbit for the Falcon 9 and Bob and Doug on board Dragon. It'll be a 2-stage flight. So we'll see the first stage fly until we hear MECO, or main engine cutoff, about 2.5 minutes into flight. After that, the second stage will take over and continue to power them the rest of the way. Second engine cutoff comes in just under 9 minutes at about 8 minutes and 44 seconds. Following that second stage completing its job, it'll continue to coast for about 3 minutes.
Raga, mi dovreste sentire un attimo. Raga, non sentite l'audio del lancio, avete ragione. Comunque, cioè io come Guarracini, poi ti metto anche moderatore, però non c'è un problema ben più grave, non si sente l'audio del lancio. Devo togliere e rimettere tutte le volte sta cosa, mi dà problemi. Non dovrebbe darmene. Scusate se mi sentite di prima.
And 45 seconds from liftoff of our second demonstration mission today, and we have the honor of having SpaceX's president and COO, Gwen Shotwell, join us. Thanks, Gwen, for coming out and taking a few minutes to chat with us.
Thanks, Jesse.
We know you've been on console. How's the countdown been going so far in there?
Countdown is clean today, just like it was Wednesday. We did clear the weather hurdles sooner than we did on Wednesday. And the only thing we're watching right now is downrange weather and lightning at the staging location.
Of course.
But we will clear that hurdle at T-minus 7 minutes.
Awesome. Great. Very exciting. Now I'm going to throw it back to 2012 because you were on console for Dragon when it was first making its way to the space station. How does that experience compare to today?
Stage 2 locks is on the DPUs.
So I was nervous then. I stopped getting nervous for launches. Today I'm nervous again. Super nervous. Stomach and throat.
Understandable.
No, it's a fantastic day today. I'm really excited. The team is pulled together. It's such a professional operation. And when I say team, by the way, I mean SpaceX and NASA. These folks have been working incredibly hard and have done a fantastic job.
Yes, and we are all so excited. And we know that you have to get back inside of Mission Control, but is there anything that you wanted to say before liftoff to NASA and SpaceX?
Well, I want to thank NASA, of course, for their generosity and their help with getting to this place. I want to thank all the SpaceXers who have come together to make this moment in history. And I want to thank Elon for hiring me.
We thank Elon for hiring you as well. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll let you get back to Mission Control. And good luck with launch today.
Thanks, Jesse. And Godspeed, Bob and Doug.
Well, we are so excited. We are just a few minutes away from countdown. So we are going to turn it over to Dan and John for the final minutes in terminal count. Take it away, John.
T-minus 13 minutes, 30 seconds, continuing to count down. We're continuing to load fuel onto the first stage. That should finish up in just about 6 minutes. Fuel is completely loaded on the second stage. That's closed out. And we are continuing to load liquid oxygen on both the first and second stage. The liquid oxygen load beginning on the second stage just about 3.5 minutes ago. We are also loading cryogenic helium into the storage vessels on the first and second stage, getting in the last little bits of helium when we keep it cryogenic, cold and liquefied. That gets us, just like we do with liquid oxygen, the maximum amount into the storage volume so that we can get the most performance out of the vehicle. Right now, we are in a fairly quiet state on the vehicle. Ground pumps continuing to put the propellant in to first and second stages. Next significant issue, call-outs that we're going to hear will probably be inside the T-minus 10 minutes when they talk to the crew. We'll listen for that. But at the moment, everything continuing to look good at T-minus 12 minutes and 20 seconds.
We're getting real close now, John. It's only a little over 12 minutes away. Just a reminder for everybody, it's about a 9-minute ride uphill. We'll have some dueling boxes going on as the first stage is going to be coming home while the second stage is carrying Bob and Doug into orbit. So obviously we'll be keeping an eye on our astronauts the whole way uphill. Some of the calls that you'll be hearing, as there will be what we call performance calls over the Dragon to ground the entire way uphill. And you'll just hear some of the SpaceX engineers calling out trajectories and booster performance. So we're always looking for that word nominal. I know that's one of John's favorite words. That's one of mine too. We want to hear nominal as much as possible up on the way uphill. You might also hear some number and letter combinations, and those correspond to the different abort zones that Bob and Doug are in during their flight uphill. There's 1A and 1B, which signify that they're on the first stage. Those carry them from there in the Cape all the way up to about the very top of North Carolina. And then we'll have 2A through 2E or 2 Echo, and that will be on the second stage, and that goes from North Carolina all the way up to about the tip of Newfoundland, so in the northern Atlantic. And then there is a zone of the northern Atlantic that we're going to avoid, and so you should hear the call out be something similar to forward to Shannon, and that just refers to Shannon, Ireland, which they'll be going off the coast of Ireland at the later stages of the second stage if they have to abort. So just prepping you now for some of those calls. You're hopefully going to hear that word nominal a whole lot on the way uphill. 10.5 minutes. Things are pretty quiet. As John I said, it'll pick up right at about 10 minutes. We'll wait for the crew just to confirm that their displays are in order. The crew is already strapped in and reported that they are go for launch. And we'll continue to watch the fuel gauges tick up on the Falcon 9 vehicle until fueling cuts off at just about 2 minutes prior to launch.
Dragon and SpaceX confirmed displays are configured for launch.
SpaceX Dragon displays are configured for launch.
Copy. Bob, Doug, on behalf of the entire SpaceX team, it's been a huge honor to help you get ready for today's historic mission. Know that we're with you, have an amazing flight, and enjoy those views of our beautiful planet.
Thanks, Jay. It is absolutely our honor to be part of this huge effort to get the United States back in the launch business. We'll talk to you for more, but thank you.
Copy all. Thanks for those words.
The SpaceX core, so again, that voice that's going to be talking to Bob and Doug throughout their mission from right here in Hawthorne, just offering a few quick words. The crew did confirm their crew displays are configured for launch. We are coming up on 9 minutes and counting.
We've gotten through T-minus 10 minute with the crew discussions. Activity is now going to switch over to Falcon 9. Our next major event comes at T-minus 7 minutes. We begin what we call engine chill. Pre-valves will open. Those currently separate propellants on the first stage from getting down to the Merlin engines. We'll open the pre-valves. That'll allow fuel liquid oxygen to flow to the top of the pumps. And more importantly, when we open the valves, that'll allow us to begin chilling the 9 Merlin 1D turbopumps on the first stage engine. It'll take a few minutes to get them cold enough to where they would then be ready to pass the large amounts of liquid oxygen through the pumps and into the main thrust chambers when we get to engine ignition at T-minus 2 seconds. We don't want to try to run highly chilled liquid oxygen through a warm pump. You would flash that in the gas, and running gas through a high-speed pump is not a good thing. So,
Raga, credo che mi si senta, spero. Che se no mi si senta. Raga, devo controllare.
Listening to the SpaceX. And so as we close.
Ho fatto un pasticcio.
So excited, and we know that you have to get back inside of mission control, but is there anything that you wanted to say before liftoff to NASA and SpaceX?
I want to thank NASA, of course.
Ci dovremmo essere. Ok. Come si sente doppio? Boh, raga, non mi aspettate.
You wanted to say before liftoff to NASA and SpaceX?
I want to thank NASA, of course.
Ci dovremmo essere. Ok. Come si sente doppio? Boh, raga, non mi aspettate.
You wanted to say before liftoff to NASA and SpaceX?
I want to thank NASA, of course.
We should hear that call out RP1 load complete coming up in about 6 minutes. Again, RP1 is just that densified kerosene or that rocket fuel that Falcon 9 is going to be used to power Bob and Doug to orbit today.
Questo è un microfono che tipo capta i rumori lontanissimi, sono totalmente un'altra stanza.
Stage 1 fuel is closed out.
6 minuti 5:59 5:53 5:59 c'è qualcuno in camera mia, sono in live.
Liquid oxygen loading is continuing on both stages. You can
5:40
see on the view on the left side of the monitor
raga, non ce la
the
faccio più.
condensation,
Cavolo,
the cold gas around the
brigatevi!
stages as the tank skins are chilled by the densified liquid oxygen, picking up the humidity from the Florida air.
Looks like at this moment we're a little more than 90% full on the oxidizer on the first stage, ticking up towards that 80% mark on the second stage. We'll be counting down all the way till about 2 or 3 minutes, as John and I just said, until everything is loaded.
Falcon 9 heaters closing out.
And then we will go for launch.
Dragon has transition to configure for terminal count.
Ok. 4 minuti, dai che magari ce la facciamo. Dai che ce la facciamo, dai che magari ce la facciamo.
Pressurizing the Falcon 9 tanks, we're going to open the clamp arm around the second stage and begin to retract the strongback. We'll move back about 2 degrees. That'll get us to the liftoff position. At liftoff, the strongback will then recline about 45 degrees away.
Started. Stage 2, RP1 bleed.
Launch director called out the strongback retract has started. On the left, you'll see it go back just a couple of degrees.
Stage 1, RP1 bleed.
Andiamo a chiamare Yolt per quest'ultima parte. Andiamo a chiamare Yolt.
Again, at this moment, Bob and Doug
Yolt, sei live.
are focused on those displays. They have insight directly into Dragon and the Falcon 9. They're able to see where their fuel loading is at, how everything's progressing down with the count.
AFTS final setup started.
Raga, tipo la maschera della casa di carta, esattamente ora.
3.5 minutes from
No, non ti si vede,
And the strongback is now reclining away from the Falcon 9.
Ma là anch'io, anche la tuta,
And back igniter purges.
Guarda. Non mi funziona, ecco. 2 minuti, raga, 2 minuti, vai a vedere la live.
Dragon has transition to terminal count.
Pure tipo questo qua, non mi chiedere.
Stage 1, LOX load close out.
O questo?
Okay, we're at T-minus 2 minutes, 42 seconds. Stage 1 LOX load is closed out. Stage 2 will continue to load.
E vai a vedere la live che dobbiamo fare la reazione.
Once we get the completion of stage 2 LOX loading, we have to vent down the line, so you'll see another large white cloud.
Raga, voi non lo potete vedere, ma
that'll be normal, that'll happen around.
mancano 2 minuti e 21 secondi al lancio.
We're going on internal power now.
Just a few seconds
E
away
raga,
from the stage 2
non
LOX
è
load being
capace di non
complete.
fare lo stupido.
It's been almost 9 years since we've been in this position. A lot of work done by thousands of people to get to this point. All our eyes focused on 2 now.
Bella per te, magari anch'io. Io quest'estate, per questo inverno, posso prendere tutte le scarpe, cioè posso scegliere un paio di scarpe.
Stage 2 LOX load is closed
1
out.
minuto e
Now
51,
flows
1
are
minuto e 51, sbrigati!
complete. Dragon is in auto idle.
Sbrigati!
Stage
Sono
2
in
LOX
live.
load complete. All fuel.
3
all
minuti e
oxidizer on
36.
Falcon 9. 1 minute 34 seconds to go till launch.
A me, raga, mette 1 minuto e 36, non idea, stiamo guardando da 2 live diverse. Noi ci teniamo il nostro minuto e 36, ho dell'urdo sullo schermo. 1 minuto e 36, 1 minuto e 36, Yolt reagirà in ritardo rispetto a me, che io non dirò niente. Quando Yolt dice qualcosa, 1 minuto e 8, 1 minuto e 7. Eh?
Falcon 9 is in startup. Dragon is in countdown. STS is armed for launch.
Questa che cavolo è? Raga, sto giocando con i timbri mentre...
Under a minute
52
now,
secondi,
STS
49.
information system
Per gli
has
ulti
been
sarà di
armed.
più, quindi aspetti i suoi.
Dragon, SpaceX, go for launch.
Ma non puoi vedere. Vai sulla mia nostra live che ci fai fare
SpaceX
anche
Dragon,
visual.
we're go for launch. Let's light this candle.
Vai live che ci fai fare visual, sbrigati. Invece di fare lo stupido insieme a me, vai live. Raga, io non reagisco, anche se tipo scoppia non reagisco.
Stage 1 tanks pressing for flight.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA, go SpaceX, Godspeed, Bob and Doug.
Ragazzi,
America has launched. So rises a new era of American spaceflight,
Stage 1
and with it
propulsion is
the
nominal.
ambitions of a new generation continue.
Raga, adesso tipo qua fanno vedere un attimo come sono messi. Raga, appena tipo trapassa lo scudo, vuol dire che è terrazzo di collo. Dai! Dai!
Falcon power telemetry nominal. M1D throttle down.
We're throttling down to get ready for the period of maximum dynamic pressure.
Raga, per farvi capire, sta guardando fuori dalla finestra per vedere se lo vede. La stupidità di questo ragazzo. Cioè, mi sembra...
All systems are go.
Raga!
Vehicle is supersonic. We've exceeded Mach 1
Si
on the
pensa.
Falcon 9.
M1D throttle up.
Lo so, lo sto guardando adesso.
We're
Vai
throttling
via.
back up to full power as we're through max Q.
Copy 1 Bravo.
Va bene, 24, 25, 26. Raga, e sono solamente 2 minuti e 26.
Until the first stage has done its job and they switch over to the second. At this point, Bob and Doug
Niente
pulling
raga,
about
è
2.
finita qua anche perché tra un po' non si vedrà più niente. Quindi io direi che la live si può chiudere qua. Siamo stati in live 1 ora e 19 per sto cavolo di razzo. E bye! Raga, la prossima live anche donazione. Quindi donate molti money. Adesso chiudo la live. Facciamo un TikTok. Come ci chiamiamo su TikTok? Come? Come ci chiamiamo su TikTok?